Well, good morning again, everyone. Welcome to our AgMIP conference on making climate smart agriculture work. We are recording the presentations, and some or portions of that will be available in the coming days. We do have a live Q&A session. Please do share any questions you have. We'll be trying to respond to those in real time, but if we don't get to everything, or if you have follow-up questions, please reach out to us, and we'll continue to work on the questions as they come in. I'd like to welcome you all of us also, and on behalf of AgMIP and our organizing committee for this conference, Cynthia Rosenzweig is the chair for the committee. I'm the director for policy and development for AgMIP. Alex Rahn is here at Columbia University and with NASA. Bruno Basso from Michigan State University, Greg Kiker from the University of Florida, John Antle from Oregon State University, and Sotirios at Iowa State University. The objectives for this conference are several-fold. We developed this with an eye towards strengthening the scientific basis for scaling effective and sustainable climate-smart agricultural systems. We want to recognize the unique requirements of diverse agro-ecosystems, including row crops, rangelands, and specialty crops. We want to link with ongoing efforts in the agencies, public-private partnerships, and legislative structures and priorities. And we want to help establish a community of practice connecting disciplines, physical, biophysical, social, and a broad range of expertise, institutions, and stakeholders, including all of those of you who have joined us for this discussion. Today, we're going to be starting with a session on economics and the issues that are involved in making sure that climate-smart agricultural practices are feasible and profitable and sustainable. And then we'll have a great panel. Our keynote is with the USDA administrator, ERS administrator, Dr. Stefanou. And then that's followed by a great panel looking at the bottom line, continuing the discussion about the economics and feasibility aspects. Then we have a focus session on COMET, what it is, how it works, what it isn't, looking at modeling climate-smart agriculture on the farm. And then we'll be looking at climate-smart conservation at landscape and watershed scales. And then we'll have a discussion about how AgMIP develops climate-smart regional integrated assessments and does model ensembles. We're very proud to have our first speaker of today joining us, Dr. Spiro Stefanou, and I'm going to hand to Dr. John Antle from Oregon State to do that introduction and carry it forward.
Great, thanks, Terry. And yeah, without further ado, really pleased to be able to have Spiro Stefanou with us and speaking about investing in models, data, and decision frameworks to inform climate-smart agricultural policy design. Spiro is the administrator of the Economic Research Service at USDA since August 2020. And in that role, he provides leadership and guidance for the agency research, analytical, and technical operations. Before his arrival at ERS, he held faculty appointments at Food and Resource Economics Department at the University of Florida. And he also was on the faculty at Wageningen University in the Netherlands, and before that, Penn State University. He's a fellow of the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association, has provided leadership in the agricultural economics profession for many years, also as past editor of their flagship journal, the American Journal of Agricultural Economics, and their journal Applied Economic Perspectives and Policy. And he served on a number of other editorial boards. And his PhD is in agricultural and resource economics from the University of California, Davis. So Spiro, welcome. Looking forward to your talk.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Let me see if I can share my screen. Let's see here. And is that working? Oh, let's see. Here we go. In presentation mode. There we go. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
We're good to go. All right.
Dr. Stefanou, could you please switch the display settings? We see presentation mode right now.
Oh,
It should be that display options or display settings up top.
asking me tough questions here now. I got two screens here. I got one that says it has the presentation mode, and the other has this.
Sorry, yeah, I believe if you go to display settings, at least on the one that has presentation mode, you can say something like switch.
Yeah, on the top left corner is
Okay. All right. Let me see if I do. Does that does not work?
Yeah, it's still in the presentation mode. If we need to, we could proceed this way, but at least when you go back from that presentation mode, you can make the switch. So if you go back to your presentation, then look at the top. Okay. There's a button that says display settings.
Display. Okay. Yeah, my other bar is in the way here. So let's see. Display setting.
That looks like it. Yeah.
So we okay?
No. If you click on that and then
down, it should say swap. Did you click on it?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I see swap. Okay. We're good to go.
That looks great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me here again. As John mentioned, I'm kind of new to federal service, and but it's been you always hear the expression, it's like drinking through a fire hose. I kind of describe it a little differently. It's like being in a James Bond film where all of a sudden you're dropped on the top of a speeding bullet train, and then you got to hang on and then figure out how to get into the driver's seat. And so I think I've made that transition pretty successfully so far. So just to give you folks an overview of what ERS does, we are anticipating trends and emerging issues in agriculture, food, environment, rural America. We focus on doing high quality, objective research. Yes, we put out a lot of research reports, but I'd like to kind of keep us focused on being an agency that's doing data and evidence building as we do our research and analysis. And that's what we're doing to inform policy. We walk up to the line in terms of policy. We don't make recommendations. We do the work to inform policymakers and other stakeholders. Now, as the name implies, we are the economic analysis and research arm. There is also an office of the chief economist at USDA. That's in another administrative unit. And those folks there look to give policy advice directly to the secretary and his office. Let's see here, click that button. So one of our important roles here is serving as one of 13 federal statistical agencies. As I mentioned, we do not make policy recommendations. We focus as a federal statistical agency on providing objective, reliable, trusted research, trusted analysis to policy, public policy, and private decision makers. And we have a pretty high bar to meet as a federal statistical agency. We are one of two in USDA. NAS, the National Ag Statistics Service, is also a federal statistical agency. And you're going to see a lot of interesting activity coming in the future about what this federal statistical system is going to look like. We're moving towards making it more transparent, easier to access data products, especially the protected data products. And all this is being mandated through the Evidence Act of 2018. So that's an undertaking in progress. I'm happy to talk to you about it. Now, I view ERS as having three core assets. Right? We have our expertise in people. We have our data, which is the second biggest part of our budget. And we have our models. And so what we look at in terms of these different products, we brought a lot of people on board. As most of you know, we had a lot of folks leave ERS with a relocation decision. We have hired up very nicely. We're at 280 permanent staff. And if you ask me what the number is, 2 weeks from now, it'll be different. But we're back up to where we were pre-relocation announcement. So ERS is back, and about 85% of our staff are new to ERS. So we are a new ERS as well. What we look at in terms of data, we are spending at least 20% of our budget on data products. These investments are primary data collection. We have a lot of secondary data products which support the modeling and other activities, for example, greenhouse gas emissions associated with agricultural management practices as part of this pool of data. We can't model what we don't measure. So what's the right level of investment in data collection over time and over space? And we also have these models, and I'm going to talk a little bit about these models, but the idea is to try to simulate policy impacts on the ag sector. We look to estimate outcomes associated with these policy changes or shocks to the ag sector. So with the support of these three core assets, ERS produces more than 130 reports and publications every year, addressing a variety of topics, as I mentioned, on ag, food, the environment, and rural America. So, what is the role of economics in integrated modeling to study climate change and ag? So what are we doing well? Well, existing models incorporate climate scenarios. We want to be able to capture market dynamics through both partial and general equilibrium models. And where do we need to look to the future? What needs more attention as we look to develop these integrated assessment models? And we're looking at different practices. We're looking at cropping systems, we're looking at livestock systems, which are the principal themes here of these types of models. Here's an overview of the models we have in place. We have 6 core models, and 2 of them are going to be a feature of this conference. I'll just briefly mention some of these others. We have a baseline model, which is looking to project how the ag economy is going to evolve over a 10-year period. Every year we update that, and that's used for a lot of budgeting decisions by OMB. We have a federal food environment data system that is run out of the Food Economics Division. They're doing a lot of interesting work on the food dollar, how you break up how the dollar spent on food is distributed across the entire supply chain, the entire system. We have a global trade analysis project going on as well. We have an international food security assessment model, which is in high demand right now with the Ukraine-Russia conflict and what the impact of that conflict is likely to have on food insecurity around the world. We have our farm model, the future of ag and resources model that Ron Sands is going to talk about more. Ron is with us today. And we also have what we call the REAP model, the Regional Environment and Agricultural Programming Model. And Kent Kovacs, Samantha Cohen lead that effort. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that. Just for a brief overview on farm, don't want to steal Ron's thunder. He's been the lead on this computable general equilibrium model. It looks at regions around the world and tries to simulate world agriculture and the energy systems going forward. A lot of indicators of interest to us: food production, crop production, land use, bioenergy production, carbon dioxide emissions. Particularly, land use, when we start thinking of markets and how resources move across the system, that's going to be a really important theme going forward. A little bit more here on the regional environment and agriculture programming model. This is a model that went a bit dormant during the relocation. Admittedly, we lost a lot of folks who worked on this model. We've hired up. It's getting up to speed. We're looking at some new directions for this model. And this model may be a really nice place to think about collaborations with folks involved in AgMIP. It's a partial equilibrium economic decision model, and it's simulating physical and economic relationships between supply, demand, resource requirements for the major ag production sources. It's measuring US ag production outcomes that result from shocks to the operating environment. So these shocks can involve technology, policy shocks, climate, market conditions. And the trade-off here is between how much data are available and the scope of our models. Now, the structure of this model is, it's a mathematical optimization model, I should say. Quite a few regions within the US, 448 regions, looking at watersheds as well as state boundaries, deals with crop rotations, and it tries to be informed by biophysical crop model simulation. We have a number of earlier studies that you can see there related to adaptation to climate change, energy crops and ag land, and hypoxia in the Gulf of Mexico. And we have a few folks involved with the model development external to ERS at Penn State, Virginia Tech, and we also lean on the Natural Resources Conservation Service for some crop modeling and hydrology work. So give you a view here of what the simulation, the biophysical simulation looks like. It's using the APEX model, Ag Policy Environment Extender model. So we have crop growth as part of this, water, sediment, nutrients. There are individual fields or watersheds composed of different management zones. And the NRCS conservation effects are in there, the SEEP model, as part of this whole system. So it's quite disaggregated. As we look at this system here and how we organize it and look at the feedbacks, we do have feedback effects coming here between biophysical and the economic models. What is enabled, what's jointly determined in terms of the system. And this schematic is showing the biophysical and economic data inputs that feed into the REAP model and the range of REAP model outputs. As we start to look at data investments to support the models, there are lots of opportunities. Conservation practice adoption is an important adaptive response to climate change. And I know the adoption of new practices and technologies is a theme here of this conference. For cover crops, there are many current models that have incorporated no-till and conservation tillage. Few models incorporate cover crops. So, adoption was 15 million acres in 2017. And adoption is continuing to increase. Cover crops are critical for modeling climate mitigation and water quality. And cover crops are kind of emerging as a key theme within USDA policy. Tile drainage is another topic. There isn't a lot of data. It's limited, and with the inclusion of tile drainage in most ag modeling efforts. But drainage is a major component of production systems.
Everybody, or
We see, it seems that there's a frozen video. So hold on, everybody, sit tight, we'll figure it out. I'm guessing he'll be right back.
So am I on, by the way, or is there a problem?
Yeah,
Now
Dr. Stefanou, you cut out for a second, but you are back now, so please proceed.
Okay, and are you seeing my screen?
We don't see your screen. It looks like you have to reshare.
Okay. I have a challenge here with Zoom here, so let me do this here.
All right, thanks everybody. We just need to be patient here. Guessing we'll reconnect in a moment. In the meantime, this would be a good time if you've seen questions or things like that you might want to address. The Q&A feature is the best place to drop those questions. It might take us a little while to have the authors circle back to them all, but we do try to address all of them. I know we were about 50 questions answered there yesterday, and if you post something in the chat, we would ask you to please try to get it to Q&A instead, because the chat can move very quickly and people might not connect the questions to the answers, etc.
John, I don't know if you want to share a few thoughts or begin introducing the panel, and we can certainly rejoin with Spiro as soon as he's able to.
Yeah, sure, Terry. Let me just.
Oh, you're on mute, sir.
I don't think so. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Yeah, my screen froze for a second too. So, despite my high-speed internet. Well, you know, just a couple thoughts on some of the things Spiro said first. You know, I think it's really interesting to see the set of models that ERS is currently working with. I had a couple thoughts and questions for him. If you know, hopefully we'll get Spiro back, and maybe we'll have a little opportunity for that, or in the panel that follows, because one of the things that we've been working on in AgMIP is how to make connections across the scales that Spiro was talking about. You saw that he was talking about the farm model and some of the models that are really like the GTAP type models that are either partial or general equilibrium models. REAP is a regional model, which I believe is a price taking model. So it's not a market equilibrium model, but it's a sort of resource allocation and model that's linked to watersheds and some of that kind of information, like Spiro was saying. And then, of course, one of the things we've learned in AgMIP is to really look effectively at how we can change specific agricultural systems to make them perform better, be climate smart, for example. We really need to get down to the specific systems and more detail. So that really creates a challenge of how we link across these different scales. There's Spiro's coming back.
Sorry, guys. Share.
Yeah, Spiro, go ahead and pick up. We were just chatting a little bit about the different scales of models that you were talking about and how we might link across those. But anyway, go ahead.
Is that I gotta do the display settings.
Yep.
Okay, good. So did, I'm gonna go back a slide. So is this something you were able to see in terms of the,
Yes.
how REAP is set up in terms of our, okay. All right, so data investments here. So we have a number of challenges, right, for data. Cover crops, when we're looking at management conservation practices, you know, there are many crops that have incorporated no-till or conservation tillage. Few models incorporate cover crops. USDA policy. I think you're going to see something about that this week even. Adoption was 15 million acres in 2017, and it's continuing to increase. So that's cover crops are certainly critical for modeling climate mitigation.
All right.
Information into the economic models, and that's going to be an important
Dr.
challenge.
Stefanou, I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. We lost you for a second there. Can we suggest that you turn off your video? It might keep the bandwidth a little bit stronger.
Okay.
And then maybe rewind 15 seconds in what you were saying. Thank you.
Let me see how I do that. I'm trying to just stop the video.
Great.
Going to be major component production systems. That's going to be a challenging next step, getting that information incorporated into economic models. Irrigation is another one, like tile drainage is a major driver of agricultural production system. Chain level is going to data on the constraints, and that exists for irrigated ag and the types of investments that could. Okay. So let's see. Let's see here. I bet. So can you folks hear me still?
We can hear you again. It's still spotty connection, unfortunately.
Okay. Let's see if I can just talk through the rest of this here. And so we're looking at data investments to support models. We're looking at the emerging conservation practices, cover crops, tile drainage water management. On irrigation, we're looking at groundwater, water rights, competition from other sectors, price, alternative wetting and drying as an example of one of those, and livestock rotational grazing and feed additives is another part of this. So this is one of my last slides here. I just want to mention our focus is on building a model that can service USDA's needs and draw on USDA resources. That's our focus at ERS. The role of markets cannot be underestimated. Economics is about a system of exchange, and the market is that mechanism for facilitating exchange. So if we're going to get the economics involved, we need to try to integrate and model these market mechanisms as well. And there's always a learning process here. We can learn by our own experience and learning from others. So we want to be part of this modeling community, such as AgMIP, and we look forward to future collaborations. And if I could show you the last slide, it would just be about thinking about ERS. We have a lot of resources here. I'd encourage you to stop by and look at our website, see what we have to offer. We have an annual report for 2021 up. It's a great synopsis of our collective research efforts in the last year. And you can subscribe to ERS publications, and you can catch us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and Charts and Notes has an app that you can download. And so with that, I will close out my presentation, as disrupted as it was, and be happy to take questions.
Great, Spiro. Thanks a lot. That was really interesting to hear about ERS and the models that you have, and some of the capabilities you're looking forward to building, and some of the data issues. I'd like to just, we've got a few minutes to follow up, and I'll see if any of the other AgMIP team can identify any questions that people have posted that they might bring up to you. But one I thought I would start us off with that probably is of interest to a lot of people in the audience. I don't want to go into the weeds of the models too much, and actually our panel, I think, is going to do more of that, so I'll save that for them. But on the data question, one of the, as a researcher, certainly one of my big concerns has been access to public data, and the data that USDA and the federal government collects that are confidential, but nevertheless of extremely high value to researchers because they're individual observations, like the ag census or the ARMS data, the ag resource management data. So I wonder if you could just say anything more about how you see that progressing, and maybe and how it relates to this 2018 act, perhaps also. I don't know if it does or not.
Happy to talk about that. Actually, I'm immersed in that to very fine detail. So that act talks about making data accessible, the Evidence Act 2018, to make data accessible, transparent, and to facilitate its access. So there's going to be a single application process, not just to NAS, ERS data, protected data, but to all data in the federal statistical system, census, status of income, IRS data. So there'll be a single application. You can drop it into the portal. Your application will be reviewed and decided upon within, our target deadline will be 12 to 15 weeks, probably 12 weeks. And then it'll go to the agency to facilitate your access to the data. So you're probably going to see a lot more data become available than was available before. So this is going to apply to the 13 principal statistical agencies as a start. Okay, many of you would like to get climate data, maybe from NOAA. NOAA is not a principal statistical agency. EPA, they're not a principal statistical agency, but that system is going to be open to to all these other agencies. There are like 125 different agencies that collect statistics and put them out there. And so we're trying to incorporate them into the system. So the intent is to be more open and to make it easier for you to access. Now you can see metadata. It's starting to get populated on research.gov, I believe is the URL. I can get the exact one and drop it in for you. And so you can see what data products are up there and the metadata that are available, and more are going to be added as the year goes on. So if you want access to ARMS data, probably the more practical responses, yeah, we can set up an MOU with you and your institution. If you want access to NAS, Census of Agriculture data, to get it at the farm level, in principle, you should be able to get access to that. And we can set up secure data enclaves for you to access it. So that the Census of Ag data, I don't know how many folks have accessed that, but I've talked to Hubert Hamer about it, and we could find a way to make that happen. So we want folks to use these data products. I mean, we spend $7 million a year on ARMS. We want to maximize its potential. So,
yeah, well, that's great to hear. I won't go up on my soapbox here take the time, but it's great to hear that that interest in making the data accessible, because I think it has been a point of concern for a lot of the research community. For example, that you have to pay almost $5,000 a year to access the Ag Census data under the current system working through the NORC enclave. It seems a little strange that after the taxpayers have paid for the data, researchers have to hustle money from USDA to then give back to USDA to access the data. But anyway, I'm curious, just a very quick question. I don't know if you know, will we have to pay through this new system to access data?
I think it's going to depend on the agency. For example, if you wanted to access census data, those are like $20,000 seats. For example, we're looking at another data enclave to use that is going to be a little cheaper. So we can always talk about money. That's we don't want the resource, the charge to be getting in the way of getting some good collaborative work done. It's got to be, and it's always with all these federal statistical agencies, it has to be a project that is consistent with the mission and objectives of the agency. So,
yeah, sure. Alex or Terry, have you guys seen? Are there any other questions you'd like to pose to Spiro before we move? We probably should move ahead to our panel.
Thanks, John. This is Alex here. Yeah, there are a bunch of questions, too many for me to put on the floor. But Dr. Stefanou, if you have a moment and want to look at the Q&A function, there are some questions there you could give a quick response to, or we are also taking note of these and can try to follow up later. But several of the questions have to do with kind of the granularity of your analyses and whether specific production systems are evaluated, or how do you get down, things like organic production systems or specific value chains. Could you say something about the where the rubber meets the road in terms of ERS analyses?
Yeah, for example, on the organic, we're looking to expand that a bit. If we can, part of this involves a sampling frame and oversampling to kind of get a better sense of the number of observations we have there. We start to look at the value chain, say many of you have heard about the meat and poultry chain in particular, the concentration level of meat and poultry. If you have four firms handling 80% of the flow of work, it's kind of hard to do kind of have a confidential statistical database there available to you. So that's always going to be a challenge. I noticed in the chat here, the Q&A, a concern about arms data is not that easy. And I don't know if not that easy means just not very user-friendly. I've heard that recently. That's something for us to address, and we don't want to create barriers and hurdles that unnecessarily. So that's something we're going to be exploring a little further. RMA is not a statistical agency. FSA is not a statistical agency. Once you take their data and merge it with, say, ARMS data, it becomes statistical agency data frames. So that's something we're going to have to deal with as well. And someone asked, why should it cost anything to access? Well, because the expenses we use are to collect the data and curate it. Access is another cost impact. So hopefully we can make it available to you, and happy to work with folks to make it work, especially how it can integrate into your models. I think that would be a great step forward. Okay.
No, thank you, Dr. Stefanou. Thank you so much for this. And I think there's lots of exciting things for us to be following up and having further discussions on.